like there's a thing that happened where wine got really expensive, like really expensive, and people just started taking it way too seriously. I've gone through a lot of historic records here in Napa as I'm learning about, different wine brands I'm representing, things like that. But I found some really cool stuff where like you can get bottles in the 60s and 70s from what are now like high-end producers making triple-digit bottles of wine. They were like $8 to $12, $15 a bottle. And that's back when tastings were free, and it was much more of like this loose kind of fun culture. You got to think back then it's like a bunch of like, hippie free love meets agriculture type of stuff in like the 60s and 70s. But, bottles were reasonably priced. They were comparable to anything else that you would do. So, and it was fun, like you said.
Welcome back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I've got an awesome returning guest. Welcome back, brother. Tell people who don't know who you are, if you don't mind.
Dude, thanks for having me back, Sean. My name is David Gibson. I am CEO and founder of Gibson Wine Consulting here in Napa Valley. Bonafide wine nerd, certified on many too many levels, and I love what I do. And for some reason, people pay me for my opinion in it. So, like, let's go. Coming to you live and direct from Napa Valley, man.
Today we're talking about something fun. It is the new year. We got through holidays. I had some people say they loved our holiday episode because they're like, dude, I have that relative. And your podcast helped me out that week. And I was like, yes. But today we're talking about bubbles and the new year, and literally something I don't know about. Like my experience with bubbles is probably the scene from Finding Nemo where the character looks and she's like, bubbles, and the bubbles pop up. But when we talk about bubbly wine, something that I'm not so versed in, talk to me a little bit about what you can tell me about bubbles.
Man, sparkling wine to me, a lot of people, they make it such a celebrated beverage, and maybe it's just me, but I like to celebrate every day, especially, some of these rainy days that we're having in Napa. Nothing better to lift your spirits than some good sparkling wine. And they're made in so many different styles, depending on where they come from in the world. So I think that'll be really fun to dive into today and kind of take a look at some of the different bubbles of the world. And I'm sitting here drinking some already. So,
right.
It's how we got to do it.
Well, one of the things that I think that people really frame bubbles, a lot of people, especially the pop media, it's either celebration. You see the dudes that have just won a car race and they're shaking the pot, and exploding the champagne onto everyone. Or it might not even be champagne, it might be some type of other sparkling wine. But then people think about New Year's, which is why we're busting out the New Year's episode. But I want to sprinkle in a little bit of some New Year's resolutions. Have you ever had a great New Year's resolution that you didn't keep?
I think every New Year's resolution is a great one, and somehow I can never hold to it for the whole year, Sean. Like, I'll come out the gates real hot, but it's a tough one, man. A year's a long time. Yeah,
it is. I rejoined the gym yesterday, so I'm going to say I got the gym one already rocking and rolling. We'll see how long it lasts. I'm hoping I can stick with it. But we'll see how that goes. Well, let's talk a little bit about some more bubbles, man. What are the different types? I always thought bubbles were just straight up champagne. What is there to the world of bubbles that I'm missing if I think everything bubbly is champagne?
Oh, you're missing a lot, but that's the common misconception that I talk to people about is like everyone refers to sparkling wine and champagne. And even here in California, up until about 50 years ago, they used to say California champagne on the label. So of course people are a little confused, but there was a legal decree, put together by France that said that if it's going to be called champagne, it has to come from Champagne, France. So nowadays, we refer to that as what we call méthode traditionnelle here in the United States or in other parts outside of Champagne, which essentially means that, a base wine is fermented. and usually lower alcohol, higher acid, picked earlier. So it has that very classic champagne style. But the secondary fermentation actually happens in the bottle that you end up buying. So it's a very labor intensive process. It usually takes at least 9 months for that secondary fermentation to happen in bottle. But some of these producers go 12, 24, 36, 48 months of the wine in that bottle to get much more of that like kind of brioche, yeasty, classic champagne note, whether the wine's from Champagne or not. So that's a fun thing, that we can start to unpack in just a bit here.
Well, I noticed that you had a glass. Are you drinking some bubbles right now?
Sure am. To me, bubbles they mean optimism. They bring like a lifted spirit. But I like to drink my bubbles out of a standard wine glass. Everyone uses, when you're at celebrations, you see the flute. The flute really kind of keeps that beautiful petulance, as we call it, that small bubble going up, showcases like the little stars. But for me, being like a bona fide wine geek, you can really like get into it and get a lot more of the aromatics from your wine if you have it in a standard wine glass, or I put mine in a Cabernet glass just because I want a little bit of a big pour, but c'est la vie.
C'est la vie, man. Well, it's interesting too, because like that is like one of the things I remember, when I was younger, I got my first bottle of sparkling wine and I was sitting there like, we were just freaking out. We're like, I don't have any champagne flutes. And so everyone was like, but then my friend was like, well, let's just drink it from a regular, wine glass. And then one of our friends was a bit of a wine snob. He's like, you can't do that. You can't drink it from a wine glass, And it was interesting because at the end of the day, none of us really knew. And, and I spoke with a champagne expert recently, and he was like, yeah, dude, I drink it from a wine glass because, like you said, it's like, get the aromatics going, get in there, smell that beautiful, beautiful wine.
I have to admit, there's been times I'm camping and I've had some really nice bottles of sparkling wine, a red Solo cup too.
Dude,
so, we always talk about like peeling back some of this pretentiousness. Wine should be fun. It should be celebrated, especially something celebratory like sparkling wine. I prefer it in a wine glass. I think it looks cool in a flute, but as long as I can get it from the bottle to me, I think we're doing pretty good.
I was in Vegas last week, or earlier this week, man. It was just this week actually. And dude, that was a marathon trip. I left Vietnam on Friday night. Flew to Vegas, got there. My wife had a show at the Venetian. We hung out. And then Monday morning, we flew back to Vietnam. It was just like, that was a long trip.
Wow.
But yeah, when we were in Vegas, like I was at a little bar with my wife. And, we had to get to another place that she was meeting up with some people. And I was like, I wasn't finished with my wine. But like the cool thing about Vegas is they're like, oh, you want to take that alcohol with you? No problem. And they came over and I was like, oh, great. And I had it. And I just a nice glass of what was it? A central like Paso Robles Pinot Noir, and tasty little wine. And then she walked up with the plastic glass, dumped it in. And I was like, for a second, I was like, oh God. And then I was just like, still a good Pinot? All right, we're still good to go.
Yeah, man, no judgment. That's like, there's been plenty of times I've had wine, especially here in Napa. You're here long enough, and people just they respect the beverage, but at the same time, like, no one needs like big pomp and circumstance anymore.
Yeah, I got my little mug. I used to have my wine mug, and it was just this mug that I enjoyed, having a glass of wine from. And my friends were like, dude, you're just wrong. And I was like, am I? Or am I enjoying a beverage that is exceptional right now?
Yeah. I think the wine business needs a lot more of that. Like, pull the pretense back. Just enjoy wine as just another fantastic fermented beverage. And, that's why I love talking to you so much about it, is like, I think we're kind of getting on that level, especially with people, that it's something, just enjoy it, have fun, No one freaks out over a high-end beer. Like, why do you freak out over high-end wine?
Right.
You know?
Oh, you just drank Pliny. It was a Pliny the Younger, you just drank Pliny the
Yeah.
Younger in the wrong way. It's like, nope, I enjoyed it. It was
No, it went
delicious.
from hand to mouth. It got there.
It got
You
there.
know?
Got the job done, my friend. Got the job
Yeah.
done. But that's one of the things too. It's like, oh man, New Year's resolutions. I will stop trying to act like I have everything understood about wine, and just go with it. Go with it. But like, enjoy it, right? Like sparkling wine basics. There are different types of sparkling wine, right? I mean, because I've heard all these, and there's some weird names too, man. I can't pronounce all these when I was looking at this list, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have fun with this one. But what are some of the main types of sparkling wine?
Well, we can put them in like a handful of like core categories, as we kind of break them up a little more internationally. As I was mentioning, the one that most people know is champagne. It's its own kind of delineated area. It's made in a very specific method. But another one that's been gaining a lot of popularity, especially in the United States here, is Prosecco. Prosecco is made from an indigenous grape to the Val d'Enne region. A lot of like some of the best vines from Prosecco or, around Veneto in this Val d'Enne region. And it comes from a grape called Glera. And Glera naturally is like a really kind of aromatic white grape. It has a lot more of these really pretty kind of floral tones to it. Has like that classic like appley structure, but can get more into like apple Jolly Rancher and like almost like candied pear. It can be really, really pretty when it's fermented. And in Italy, the Italians, they love the sparkling wines, but they took that, champagne method or method traditional, as we call it, and kind of reinvented it a little bit. So instead of all that secondary fermentation happening in bottle, with Prosecco, it's actually a method that's called Charmat. And we'll actually see that employed with some sparkling wines in the United States here too. But it really gained a lot of traction with Prosecco. So the Charmat method, instead of that secondary fermentation happening in the actual bottle that's going to come to market with your sparkling wine in it, it's done in this pressurized tank, which keeps it a little more crisp and bright and keeps whatever wine that's in that tank a little more fruity. It doesn't get quite as yeasty, but that secondary fermentation still happens naturally. Like a lot of people know that when yeast eats sugar, it produces alcohol, but it also produces heat and a very large amount of CO2. Like we're talking multitudes of atmospheres of pressure that are developed either in a champagne bottle or in a Charmat tank. So it takes a special type of tank. And then once that secondary fermentation is done, it's bottled, straight away into, you typically like a, champagne style bottle with a deep punt. They add the cork and then also add your cage to it to make sure that cork doesn't go flying out. But that's why, Prosecco can be made a little quicker, can be made much less labor intensive. So you can see like really great sparkling wines that are true DOC Prosecco that are typically a lot more approachable in price than champagne. And, then there's another one, if we jump to Spain, we've got Cava. Cava is probably the best value in sparkling wine. It's made in Spain and it uses that same method traditional, that champagne method that we see coming out of Champagne. But it's made from an indigenous grape called Macabeo that can be really minerally, very citrusy. And so you can usually find like really reasonably priced Cavas as well. I can keep going down the list for you, man, if you want. I think I've got like probably two more good ones.
Two more. What are the other ones, man? Because this is like super informative. I've heard some of these names and I was just like, yes, okay.
Some of my favorites, if we're talking about, once again, like French sparkling wine, but that doesn't come from Champagne, there's some regions like the Loire and Burgundy that make what we call cremants. It's made in the exact same style of Champagne, typically has Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, sometimes some other grapes in it because there's no limits to it. Like in Champagne, it has to come from those 3 grapes. In some of these other areas in France, they can get a little more playful with it. You know, you see things labeled Cremant de Loire, you see Cremant de Limoux. I just mangled that for those professionals that are out there that are going to hang my feet over the fire. I'm a token California boy. I don't speak French.
Right.
Joking. But you know, the Cremant de Limoux, what a lot of people don't realize is there were these monks at the Abbey Saint Hilaire that started making sparkling wine there 100 years before like Dom Perignon, quote, invented it in Champagne. So if you want something that's like a little older and more classic than like Champagne just had the marketing behind it. You know, there were sparkling wines being made throughout France before that. I love cremants. You get a great bang for your buck and you get something that's very like Champagne-like. And then the last one to appease all my hipster buddies out there is Pet Nat. You know,
what is Pet Nat? I've heard that so many times mentioned that I have literally no idea what that is.
Yeah. Well, it's not a pet that's a really small fly. It's not a pet gnat. Terrible dad jokes all day.
Well, hello, dad jokes.
Pet gnat means petulant natural. So what that method is, you know, as you're here in Napa and, you know, you've got a really cool Sauvignon Blanc that's just finishing fermenting, hasn't even finished primary fermentation yet. So it's very different than a lot of these other styles we've been talking about.
Yeah.
You just keep your fingers crossed when it's got like maybe 2 or 3 grams of sugar per liter left. You go ahead and you bottle that. And they usually have like what's called a crown cap, which is like a beer cap on it. Usually they're kind of foggy. They've got some funky yeast to it. Sometimes like they develop some like weird aldehydes or like kind of like funkiness to it, which is why I jokingly call it like hipster wine. Funky and unpredictable though. Like some of these people, they're bottling it and they think that they've got their numbers right. And as they're putting it in cases, they end up having like, you know, grenades of bottles that develop too much pressure and either that beer cap ruptures or the bottle ruptures. It's risky business, but pet nuts are fun. They're just fun, funky, weird, wiggly types of things. And they're made from anything. So
they can be any type of varietal.
Any varietal, especially here in California, we're seeing people do it with some really weird stuff. Some that are like, you know, dark reds, Syrahs, like other big things that are in the middle of fermenting. And they're like, let's try making this a pet nat and see what happens. You know, it's a lot more of like the small producers that can really afford to just have fun with stuff. And there's some phenomenal pet nats out there. And there are some that I open it and I think my sink just ends up drinking the whole bottle instead. So you never know.
You never know, man. You know, it's like there is something to be said for the creativity, but it leads me to ask, because that immediately leads into this next question. Like, what makes a sparkling wine good? Because, you know, if the sink is drinking half of that bottle, you know, it might not be that great. But, you know, is it, you know, when I go back to I've had bottles of champagne at, you know, anniversaries, parties, such. And there are times where I'll have a glass and be like, this is just okay. But there's other times where I sit there and it hits different. And I'm just like, and I don't know what it is. Is it the bubbles? Is it just, what is the flavor profile? I don't get it. Like, but what do you think makes a really good sparkling wine?
Well, I think there's a couple things to unpack there because, you know, much like any still wine, you know, you really have to consider what your base grape is. You know, what grape is this being made out of? Because that's going to give you some kind of insight into what the flavor profile is going to be.
Yeah.
You know, but I think like every good sparkling wine, whether it's something that is like a bone dry laser beam of acid or a wine that has some residual sugar to it, with sparkling wines, it's all about acidity. You know, it really has to have great acid on the palate, in my opinion. And then another thing too is like, how long did this wine spend on those yeast lees? So, after the secondary fermentation happens in bottle, yeast is like a single-celled organism. It's pretty much like carbon and protein. The longer that this bottle sits after going through secondary fermentation on that yeast, the more of that like biscuity, baked bread, kind of doughy tone it takes on before they do something called disgorgement. They'll take those bottles and let them sit so that all that yeast settles in the neck in this traditional champagne method. And then they'll dip them, back in the day, it used to be iced with salt, then it was liquid nitrogen, and it freezes that bit of yeast in the neck as the bottle's inverse. Then as they flip it over, take that beer cap off, it shoots that little bit of yeast out, and then they can either top it off or add a little bit of unfermented wine to it to sweeten it up and balance that acidity before they put your classic cork and cage on it. So went on a huge diatribe right there. But to me, like the more yeasty it is, the longer that it sits on the yeast lees, the more texture it has, the more creamy it is, regardless of what it's made from or how acidic it is. And then the last thing I touched on is sweetness. We've got anything from like, well, biggest misnomer here. Everyone looks at brut. They think it's the driest there is out there. There's actually wines that are much more low in sugar on the palate than brut. And then what I was going to say, the funniest thing is extra brut is actually a sweeter style. A lot of people think they're going to get drier wine if they see extra brut on the label. But like with classifications, you have brut nature, which is just natural sparkling wine, doesn't have any kind of sugar added in the dosage. That's like 0 to 3 grams per liter. Then you have extra brut, that's like 0 to 6 grams, brut 0 to 12. Then extra dry is the misnomer that I was speaking about. That's actually like 12 to 17 grams of sugar per liter. Then you go into sec, which means sweet, or demi-sec, which is even sweeter, or doux, D-O-U-X, which is like more sugar in it than a can of Coca-Cola. So as you're looking at some of these different labels, you can really kind of figure out how sweet your sparkling wine is going to be by what it says on that label too. So you asked a simple question, and I gave you a very long political answer to it. But
that's awesome, because it's like it gives me an informed decision to make. It's like, all right, I can go in there and sit there and go, well, what is it that I actually do want when I'm drinking wine? Do the sparkles, do I want something that is, tasting and helping me have like a candy rush, or do I want something that's just, much drier and leaves me feeling happy on another way? It's
exactly.
Like, you can't go wrong with the sparkling wine. But it is interesting to see there is still a variety that you can hit your own flavor profile. You can hit this place that you like to drink it, and it's kind of good like that. But one of the things too is like, I had been talking to a guest, and he was talking, with wine, we talk about food pairings. Like, that's a huge deal. It's like what wine pairs with what, but with sparkling, I just always was like, well, dude, this is like, let's celebrate. It's just drinking the wine. But some people are like, it pairs really well with a lot of different things. Like, I mean, I don't know what it pairs with, but it pairs with everything. Can sparkling wine go with bacon? I mean, why not?
Yeah, I could totally see that. Like a lot of people, like from the bougie angle, they talk about like, oh, I'm gonna have my champagne with, some Russian caviar and Bellini with like a little bit of creme fraiche, which is like, don't get me wrong, Sean, like fantastic pairing, but like, I'm exposed to a good amount of caviar, but it's not like my go-to, like for me. Like my favorite pair, and I like to drink, like if I could drink sparkling wine every day and like not end up in the poorhouse, I would. And one of my favorite pairings with it is fried chicken. or any
Dude.
kind of like starchy fried food. But like my go-to with like, I could be drinking a bottle of Krug or Ceylon, like some high-end champagne. Give me an awesome piece of fried chicken. And to me, that's like hands down one of the best pairings.
I like that.
Regardless of champagne pairing, other wine pairing, like fried chicken or like, you know, fried cheese curds or something with sparkling wine. Maybe that's a fat kid in me, but you know, it's like really good.
That's a great pairing, man. You know, and one of the things too is like, and I didn't put this on the outline, but it popped into my brain is one of the things that I just think about too is like the drinks that are made with sparkling too, you know, because I know it's after a rough girls' night out, they're going to be busting out the mimosas, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, champagne, it's sparkling, it can be used in multitudes of ways, even if you're pouring orange juice in there.
Nothing wrong with that, man. I tell people if you're dropping ice cubes in your Chardonnay, if that's how you like it, do it. I love myself like a good bottomless mimosa bar. It's usually got some decent Prosecco, and then I'm getting my vitamin C too. You know, it's not a bad way to wake up, and you're going to end up taking a nap by 1 p.m. anyways, if that's your Sunday brunch schedule. But one of my favorites right now, I love to do something more like an Aperol spritz, you know? It's just like a shot of Aperol, a nice pour of Prosecco. Sometimes people will like doll it up any way that they want, but I think sparkling wine cocktails are awesome, especially for, you know, a generation that's looking at cocktailing more. You know, I think it's a great idea.
I think so too. You know, it's like I think that it's the tool that you're using to find joy in life, and however you're going to use that, you know, use it in a way that's fun, man. It's just like I think that one of the things that I was talking to someone this week about how everyone's talking about, oh, well, you know, Gen Z's not drinking alcohol, this or that. And one of the things too is like, I think that people have forgotten to make wine fun. Like, you know, and we're not talking, you know, rich versus poor, you know, fancy versus not fancy. I'm talking like even super high end stuff is just not as much fun as it could be, you know? I remember when I was younger, I went to Meadowoods. I was working as a waiter at that event. What was it? The wine auction. It was a bunch of it was really, really wealthy people. And there was like a really expensive wine. But I can promise you this, they were having a blast. You know, it was like, I remember sitting there and I'm just sitting there serving a table and I look over and I got Michael Jordan right there. And like, I was like, dude, that's Michael Jordan. And, you know, and we were on the golf course serving food. And like, I just kept looking down. I'm like, Michael Jordan must be crying inside that they're destroying this golf course to have all this food. But one of the things is like, people were having a great time and it was fun. It was festive. And, you know, and I think that we got to get back to that fun nature of wine.
I agree, man. I think like there's a thing that happened where wine got really expensive, and people just started taking it way too seriously. You know, I've gone through a lot of historic records here in Napa as I'm learning about, you know, different wine brands I'm representing, things like that. But I found some really cool stuff where like you can get bottles in the 60s and 70s from what are now like high-end producers making triple-digit bottles of wine. They were like $8 to $12, $15 a bottle. You know, and that's back when tastings were free and it was much more of like this loose kind of fun culture. You know, you got to think back then it's like a bunch of like, you know, hippie free love meets agriculture type of stuff in like the 60s and 70s. But, you know, bottles were reasonably priced. You know, they were comparable to anything else that you would do. So, and it was fun, like you said, you know, like
it was fun. I was reading recently about a $2,000 to $3,000 wine tasting. And I was just like, that's rad. And I just want to say one thing right now. to the people charging $2,000 and $3,000 for the wine tasting, David and I would more than be happy to come and see these wonderful wines that you're serving. More than happy to be there. But, it's not something that I can do every day, and it's something that, maybe a New Year's resolution to get to that baller status. But, it is something that I also want to make sure that we're getting wines that are in the price range that I can kind of dive into,
Yeah. There are some exquisite experiences out there. And that's truly what they are. You're paying for, something that is just absolutely top line, drinking the best of the best wines, usually paired with food in a stunning setting, and I get it. It's just, that's also a lot of money as we're trying to get more common people back into wine. But the cool thing is there's something for everybody, just like sparkling wine. You could drink sparkling wine every day instead of any other wine, depending on what kind of budget you're on and what you're trying to do. It's people don't understand that, that it is truly approachable.
And it's all about new beginnings, man. We're coming into the new year, and now I'm gonna mix it up a little bit on you. I am going to read some awesome, horrible New Year's resolutions, and I want to see you which pairs with you, and which ones you think are the best and worst at this point in time. All right, number 1, I'm gonna fix my entire life by Monday. All right. Right. Oh man, if only Monday was that far away. Right. This year I'll spend less money, or the inverse of that. This year I'll make more money. Probably I like the latter. I'm waking up every day at 5 a.m. and I'm cutting out sugar, carbs, alcohol, and fun. I'll answer emails immediately. I'll stop procrastinating, and this year I'll become a whole new person. Any of those speak to you?
Yeah. The one about cutting out sugar and carbs, not to like selfishly bring that back to wine, but like a lot of people don't realize that most wines are like bone dry, that there's not a lot of sugar in them. So if you're going on this keto diet, you don't necessarily have to stop drinking. You just have to drink the right thing. That doesn't mean like going for a bottle of vodka. You can actually have like some great wine that doesn't have a lot of impact sugar to it. Like we were talking about, champagnes. Go for brut nature. You've got like less than a gram of sugar per liter in an entire bottle. Like most people have more sugar than that in like their morning coffee. So right. So just a fun thing, to think about, and like, God, I don't know. There's so many, like that whole, I'm going to reply to my emails in like X amount of time. I'm usually pretty good about that. I'm usually getting back to people in about 48 hours. But, I've looked at it and been like, you know what? I'm going to clear out these 192,000 old emails that I never archived or did anything with. I'm sure I'm not the only person that has an inbox like that where, they're read, they're dealt with, but I've got 15 years of emails in here and I don't know where to start. That to me is like a little more of a solid, doable resolution.
I had I started up a new work email for my company, and I got the work email going. I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to keep on top of this email. And, it was like after a week, I was like, all right, I'm done. It's like, it's done. It is now like every other email account I've ever had where there's this host of all these things. And yeah, man, it's crazy. But one of the things, like, I want to come back to the new year and sparkling a little bit. Like, I think, like what you said earlier, there was something that you really said, like, every day is a good day to celebrate. Doesn't mean we're going to be drinking sparkling wine every single day. But like, man, if you make it through the end of the day, that was a win. That was a win right there, And if you have something to celebrate, even on the worst of days, talking about the email thing, I will say no names. I will throw no one under the bus. But I have a couple podcasts I do, and I try to get guests into these, right? And I had emailed some person in the media industry, and probably a pretty cool, interesting individual. I looked him up because it was recommended from LinkedIn, and I was just like, all right. Person's worked in the industry for a while. I emailed them on Wednesday. They emailed me on Thursday. I sat down because I'm in Asia. We have a time difference. And also I edited like a couple of music videos. I had a lot of client work. And I was like set aside on Friday. I'm getting into my emails. And I got this message and it was like, I kid you not, man. It was like, and you see why some people are successful and some are failures. It was just like one line, and I was just like, "Hang on, was this meant for me? Like, what is this all about?"
Cold,
dude. And I was like,
"Man!"
And I messaged back, and I was like, and I just was like, "Dude, and I am, dude. I got that bite to me. I might look fun and happy on my podcast, but like." I've got that edge to me, and I just don't take that stuff too well. I studied Muay Thai for years. I'm a black belt in judo. Like, I got that fight in me. And I was like, my wife was like, honey, let it go. And I was like, the hell I'm going to let that go. And so I messaged that back over. And I was just like, just want to know, was that for me? Because like, you know, I messaged you a day and a half ago. You emailed yesterday. And just want you to know, I run a media company. I have, 20 different employees that all are messaging me. I've got 2 music videos that I just edited yesterday. And it wasn't a flex. It was just like, life is busy, man. And like, I've got a wife and kids. And the person messaged back going, you know what? I also have had this, and I am successful because of my great communication skills. And I was like, well, your communication skills seem like they're kind of shit right now, man, because you just messaged me this random thing. And then like, and he went back and forth, and like, and finally I was like, you know what? I appreciate it. I wish you well. I'm never going to forget this interaction. I'll like never forget this. But I wish you well, man. And that's it. Like, we're not a match. And I'm not throwing shade or anything at you. And he's like, I will also never forget this. And I do not need your well wishes because my success comes from hard work. And I was just like, block. And just like, block, done. And what was like, blew me. And he threatened me. He's like, all right, well, he's like, maybe I'll see you at South by Southwest this year. And I was just like, dear God, like, are you saying that you like, because I didn't text you back, you're going to try to beat me up somewhere? And like, just so you know the type of person this is, I'm going to say this and you're going to get it. Like, I didn't do my research to this person before I invited him. He's the type of guy who's got glasses that buckle in the front, that connect in the front. That you know what I mean? Like, and then he lets them hang. He lets them hang and then puts them on and they connect in the front and then lets them hang. And I was just like, oh man. So getting back to that, at the end of that day, I was just like, oh, I got through that day and my wife had a hell of a day on the same day. And I was just like, we sat down and we went out for a glass and like, and it was not, I'm drinking away my challenges. It was simply like, I am celebrating. And I looked at my wife and I was like, I feel like today I need something bubbly. I actually had a rosé. One we didn't mention, rosés. I had a rosé because I was just like, dude, I need something lighthearted and sparkly today. You know?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Well, I didn't touch on rosé because any of those different wines can be made in a rosé style. So
talk to me about
bump
that.
on your brain. Yeah. So whether, and God, man, that was like,
right. What a story is it? Dude,
bro, I don't know if you saw me. I'm like, yep, I'm going to keep pouring a little more wine for myself here. Like, God, I feel bad for Sean. I just opened a Magnum with my wife because we're going to go build like gingerbread houses with kids later. We're like, yeah, let's get that Magnum of bubbles open. That sounds like a great idea,
Dude.
But anyways, where were we going?
Rosés.
Tough day, rosé sparkling. So like if you are in Champagne, you can make a rosé by, instead of using Chardonnay, you can use Pinot Noir, or it's like little known distant cousin, Pinot Meunier, both red grapes. And the longer you let them sit on their skins, the more of that rosé color you're going to have. So, that more pink, almost fuchsia hue depending on how long it's sitting on those skins, the more color it's going to extract. And it can still be champagne. It can still be made in the champagne style. It can still have all the different classifications of sugar levels. It just happens to be, pink instead of blonde. Same with like cremant. Any kind of cremant, since you can use red grapes making it. And there's even some like crazy Aussies that are making like actual dark red sparkling Shiraz and using the method traditionale, the champagne method, making it. So like that's the fun thing about bubbles is it can be made from so many different grapes and these primary styles, of how it's made, predominantly the champagne method or the Charmat method, whether that secondary fermentation is in bottle or in tank, kind of just determine a little more of the style of it. Either one has like a really nice fine petulance or bubble to it. The method champenois, the traditional method, arguably you get a little bit of a finer, kind of creamier bubble, where, some purists say that the Charmat, that Prosecco or tank method, has a little bit of a larger and more pronounced bubble. But I think they're both fantastic. At least you're not just like blowing CO2 in it like you're doing soda pop or something, like that's, if you see sparkling wine with CO2 added, by all means, like do not put that in your mouth. You do not want that.
Right.
I don't judge, but like I just would highly advise against it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel you, man. It's like the one of the things too is like that I enjoy about, and this is weird. Not weird, but like something I enjoy. I mean, all wine has this long tradition. But it's like, to me, there's something to be said for, I remember when I was in school and we had this stupid tradition that we had to run up this hill and then run down, and yet everyone came and sat next to this damn rock. Why? I don't know. But like, I was super excited when I got to sit next to the rock, and, and it was this thing that everyone did, And one of the things too that I love about champagne and sparkling wines is I feel for a little bit, like, dude, I'm like, my family is like lower middle class, working class family,
Mine too.
And for a little bit of time, champagne helps me and sparkling wine helps me feel fancy. And I don't always get to feel fancy. I get to go with my wife to fancy parties. And I noticed that like at fancy parties, 99% of the people there are kind of like me and people that are just trying to figure out how to feel fancy, but they're not fancy. And there are certainly some of the people that are fancy, but even them, they're just not fancy all the time. But you know what? I love that a good sparkling helps me feel a little bit more fancy for a little bit of time.
Dude, I love that. I totally agree. I think it's just like, it's what's been impressed on us in like movies and TV shows, that sparkling wine is for celebration, and a lot of times like the really well-known champagne houses are really expensive bottles of wine. You're talking 150 to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for a 750 milliliter bottle for like 5 glasses of wine. And so that's what people internationally know is like that champagne is expensive. And so I think that like that's where this like really illustrious feeling of like having sparkling wine, because it's fancy, it's celebratory, it's for like special occasions. That's a mindset that's been kind of pushed into us constantly. So I totally feel you. I think like, yeah, when you're trying to be fancy, what's the simplest fancy thing to do? Grab one of those flutes of sparkling wine that they're pouring and just keep drinking that, because no one's going to judge you. It has this like kind of fancy vibe to it. Rather than trying to decide, what specialty whiskey or cocktail you're going to get without judgment, you can just have a glass of bubbles and you're pretty much set. You can walk around any, high society cocktail party with a glass of sparkling wine, and no one's going to think twice or judge you, on what you're drinking,
Right. Well, and I think at the end of the year, one of the things that I want to think to kind of tap into. And like, we talked about the celebration, and I think that at the end of the day, I have to remind myself is that every single day should be a celebration. Like, every single year, man, we're getting through something and you're coming up. And to me, I, even on the most difficult of days, I'm thankful for something. And I want to spin that as we finish up. One last question, like, what's something that you're thankful for this year, man?
Oh man. I know it's so cliche, but it's something that I find myself happy for every year. Health, happiness, and great family. Because you think anywhere in the world, there's a lot of people that are missing one of those three things. So if I have health, happiness, and a great family, it doesn't matter how much money I have. It doesn't matter, what's going on in any like weird, wacky political spheres. Like my A1 check-in right there is covering those bases. And if I have that, then in all honesty, I don't need much else, food and water. And if I have some sparkling wine or, some great wine in between, that's awesome. But to come back to something really simple, holistic, and human, love, appreciation, those kinds of things, those are things that I'm always truly thankful for, because I couldn't imagine living without it. And there's some people that they're lonely, they're sick, and they have nobody, and like that's rough, dude. So not to get all deep and dark on it, but
spot on, man. I one of the things too is like I have my financial podcast, the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast, and I get to talk to
That's a cool podcast, man. I finally checked it out. Yes, thank you.
Fun,
Sorry about that. It took me a while.
No worries. It's a fun one, man. And I talk to these cool financial advisors that talk about all this cool stuff. But one of the things that like everyone says in that podcast, and I saw someone else who interviewed someone the other day, there's this core thing that you ask super high net worth individuals, you ask anyone, and you ask these like super wealthy billionaires, like, what advice would you give someone? And they're like, spend more time with family, man. Spend more time with the people you care about. Like we sit there and we want to think about all these fancy things, but at the end of the day, all you really need is that connection, which is again why I love a good bottle of wine, man. It's like, if I'm overwhelmed and stressed, I can bust out a bottle with my friends and family, and we can just sit there and we're going to be giggling in an hour. We might be crying at some point too, but we're doing it together, and that's the beauty of it.
It's that social lubricant, like I always say. It helps you, if you're having a great time, helps bring that out. If you need to purge something, maybe it gives you the courage to talk to these people that you're with and just get it off your chest. It's just been on your mind, so yeah, man, health, happiness, family, love, those are like core tenets that I'm always really grateful for. So,
all right, do you have any New Year's resolutions that you're actually going to try to bust out this year?
I'm like you, man. I'm going to get back in shape, I used to be, svelte, 220 pounds. As I've joked in other podcasts, I'm pushing the north end of like 260. I need to trim down, I heard a really cool inspirational thing, I've got a 6-year-old son, and it said, Daddy always told me that he would die for me, but I wish that one day he actually just decided to live for me. Yeah, and I saw that and I'm like, okay, like that makes me want to get back in shape and like really kind of live with my kid and have some fun and be active before he's all grown up and it's too late, So that's kind of my New Year's resolution. And that's the reasoning behind it, where a lot of people are just like, I'm going to get back in shape. I'm like, mine's got some depth to it, So yeah. I'm right there with you, man. Time to get active, join a gym, make it happen.
Start with your why, man. If you don't start with your why, it's hard to keep things up. And no matter what, on those days that you're feeling sore, I'm sore today after getting back in the gym yesterday. I was like, I just went light and I was just like, oh, damn. Oh, man, I'm feeling that. Chest day was a hell of a day. But yeah, man, I'm going to have a nice glass of, I picked up a little mini bottle. I was just in the wine and in the airport, and I didn't have a chance to buy anything. So I was able to grab a mini bottle of Joel Gott's Cabernet and on the way out. And I was just like, there we go. Something mini.
Oh, man, did you guys just get back? Like,
dude, we just I flew back on Monday, man. So I was just flying.
Oh, man.
Dude, I did look at the wine section at SFO, but it's a nice wine selection, actually. SFO's International Terminal has some fancy wines, phenomenally fancy wines, but it was not the price point I was looking at, but I was like, I know Joel Gott, and I know they make good stuff. I was like, I'm going to grab that one.
You know, I'd pull this out because I wanted to talk about value, and this is a Magnum.
Okay, yeah, that is a red.
So, J. Laurent, Cremants de Limoux, as I was saying, started making sparkling wine 100 years before champagne did, you know, and this is a winery that was established by a famous champagne producer, Michel Dervine, in like the 1980s. And I'll be honest, I don't usually talk turkey, but like there's a local wine shop here in Napa. You can get this bottle for like just over $40.
Dude,
and it's fantastic. You know, it tastes like champagne. It's Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and it has I just taken some notes too. It has about 25% Chenin Blanc to it. So it's just fun, crushable, easy drinking. And like I said, bang for the buck to get something like really good that's large format. Like, can't shake a stick at that one, you know?
Yeah, man. Not at all. Well, brother, I want to thank you. We got to do this again sometime soon, man.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's chat. We'll figure out what's in the future here for both of us.
Right. And to everyone, this will air right before New Year's. To everyone watching, Happy New Year. And let us know in the comments what you're drinking this New Year.
Yep. Cheers, Sean. Thanks, man.
Cheers. I forgot my glass, man. It's early in the morning. I said I was going to have a glass with you, too. Damn.